There's been an argument that has started on my last video. I wasn't even gonna make this video. I realized after a few comments though, I didn't answer the big question, which is this new and improved sensor in the FX30 actually much better than the one in the a6500? Or, you know, the a6400, a6600. So this guy asked me, he's like, what's the direct low light comparison like? What, you know, is it actually better at ISO handling? And even though I told him like I really feel like the FX30 is leaps and bounds over the a6500, I can't answer that because I haven't done that direct comparison. A guy commented on his comment and replied and said he had the a6500 and the FX30 now, and he feels that the FX30's grainy and only slightly better at low light performance. At first I was like, is this guy even using the same camera as me? Am I brainwashed from all the hype about this new FX30 camera? And then now I'm really interested. I have to make this video. So today we are gonna directly compare settings for settings with the same lens from base ISO to, you know, whatever. And then, so that you guys get a good understanding what camera's best for you, I'm gonna go through the pros and cons of both cameras, and you can take the information for yourself, right? Make your own decision. And I hope you guys make some cool videos with whatever camera you're using. I just don't understand like everybody arguing over this stuff. If you want my honest opinion right now, I don't like shooting video on this. I don't. There you go. I thought about doing this outside, and then I decided that in Canadian winter, it was just a bad idea, and it was gonna be hard for me to get the perfect frame every time, so I decided to just borrow my kid's room and this little figurine of Spider-Man. I used the tripod, same lens, and just swapped cameras. I was able to get almost the same frame perfectly. At ISO 800 in the beginning of this test here, I have both of these images zoomed into 300%, and I wanted to see this image at its worst. You know, that's why we're going super low light here, black figurine. And the only reason why I wanted to use these little fill-in lights that I have, these HSL lights, is just to kind of show a bit of contrast and tonality in the shape of this black figurine. But as far as I'm concerned, this is as dark and low light of a test you can get. So I made it so that both of these at 800 ISO are, I think it was one stop underexposed. And then the way I filmed this is that once it got up towards the second base ISO in the FX30, which is ISO 2500, it was, I believe, at like proper exposure. And then after that, brought my ND filter back so that it kept proper exposure the entire time. And this set of video that we're gonna run through, I did not add any contrast. This is pure straight out of camera. I zoomed in at 300%, starting at 800. I would say both of them are looking super clean. And as we come into 1,000, and tell me in the comments, guys, if you feel any different about my opinion for what I'm gonna say in this video right now. But at 1,000, they're both clean. 1250, I start to see some grain in the a6500. Still not really seeing it in the FX30. At 1600, yeah, it's a little more grainy again on the a6500. Very little on the FX30. At 2000, you can both see some grain on these. I would say it looks a little more defined on the FX30. At 2500, I'm gonna stop it right here. This is the second base ISO and the little advantage that this FX30 has, because if you were to scrub back in this video back to where I just showed the 1600, I'll put a timestamp, right? This is where I feel like the FX30 kind of jumps back to being around 1600 ISO again. It's like just the tiniest bit of noise in the image. It's really not as clean as the 800 ISO, but it does clean up a couple of stops better. And then the a6500, I would say, is a couple of stops worse than this now, right? at this level. So, and then when we continue beyond, I start playing this again, when we get into 3200 ISO, I would say the FX30 looks fairly clean still, and the a6500 looks fairly noisy. At 4000, FX30 and a6500, yeah, the FX30 still looks pretty clean. At 5000, you can definitely see noise in both of them, and it's starting to look pretty bad on the a6500. At ISO 6400, you start to see some noise really coming back at the FX30. And then 8000, it's still acceptable on the FX30, not on the a6500. This is kind of where it starts to get interesting though. 10,000, you really start to see the noise pick up in the shadows on the FX30. At 12,800, I would almost say they're almost as noisy again. Now at 1600, I would definitely say both of them are almost equally as noisy, and that's kind of interesting to me. At 20,000, both of them are just unacceptable anymore, and that's the end of the range for the comparison. The FX30 is the only one that has ISO 32,000, so I wouldn't even use it. So I'm gonna say at this point right now, I was kind of wrong coming into this video, because I actually expected the FX30 to be a lot better at ISO handling. It has a slight advantage with that dual ISO. Once you start to get upwards to like 10,000 ISO though, they're almost like matched in noise again. My opinion, what do you guys think? I want to say right now, and I know somebody's gonna comment on this probably already because they didn't even watch through to the end, but people are gonna be like, Tony, why was the a6500 so soft, right? Was it out of focus? Did you miss focus? And I did 4 rounds of going through the ISO on each camera, the same lens, adjusting the focus on ISO 800 for each turn, and then I locked the focus and kept it the same throughout. And I would say all 4 of my results on the a6500 looked softer like that. And I was confused. I was like, did I miss my focus 4 times? But when I started to look into the specs of both of these cameras, I realized that the FX30 had more resolution. Even though both of these sensors are said to be 6K downsampled to 4K, it has a slight advantage. And that's what I want to kind of talk about here, because when I was originally in my first video, you know, saying to this guy in the comments, I don't like where this light is sitting. When I was talking to this guy in the comments, I was saying that I thought the a6500 was just not as good. Like the FX30 is leaps and bounds better, and that's because it's a better image, right? You guys saw it. It's sharper. The tonality is better. The ISO handling wasn't really much different, right? But it is still a better image. And remember that this is a low dynamic scene just for noise testing. Imagine we were in a more natural situation with like a sunset, and you got high dynamic range going on, really bright brights and dark darks. You get one more stop of dynamic range out of this camera, and that meaning if you have a fast enough aperture, you can expose this to be a little brighter than what's natural and get those shadows right out into the histogram so that you have all that detail there. And then when you bring it back to normal, it's going to be way cleaner, right? One stop of light isn't much, but it makes a big difference. It really does. And since I've had my hands on this camera, well, let's check out some specs. The FX30 is $1,700. The a6500, when it first came out, was $1,400. You could probably find it for about $1,200 or even $1,000 right now, new, possibly. I don't know, but that was a while ago, right? 26 megapixels versus 24. That's the extra resolution, that sharpness when you're zoomed in at 300%. Stabilization, you get a half a stop more in the 5-axis with the FX30. On top of that, you have this active stabilization that adds a little bit extra digitally, and it does that by cropping in slightly. And people make a big fuss over that. I've been doing this 16-55, which people say isn't wide enough to vlog, but I don't know. I've been vlogging with active stabilization on, and I will say, you know, I use these pipes. It's doable, right? This camera doesn't have rapid burst, right? A6500 does, because this is not photocentric, right? This has no viewfinder. That really sucks. So that's kind of a downside, right? This has no flash, but I only really used the flash on the a6500 probably twice. I even bought an external flash because, well, you know, turn the internal flash on its side and it just looks dumb. This got dual card slot. It's got focus breathing, right? Compensation. So when I decide to change my focus, it doesn't zoom in and out. So making it amazing for video, right? The a6500 doesn't have a flip screen. This does, right? This has hot shoe audio. The a6500 doesn't. This has 10-bit color. The a6500 has 8. So I'm sorry I made a bunch of a6500 fans mad by saying in my comments that I think that the FX30 is leaps and bounds over the a6500, but it's not that it's like way better at any one thing in particular. It's a little bit better at everything. You even get into the autofocus. The autofocus of this thing is insane. I never turn it off. Like, it's so good. And it keeps your face. It recognizes the eye. You see how I did that, right? Woo! And it's also got animal eye autofocus, right? The a6500 I don't think has eye autofocus in video at all, right? So, and I'm mostly talking about video in these videos, right? The last one I was. So I just don't understand why everybody don't piss off an a6500 fan. Oh, let's not to mention, this has 120 frames at 4K. A6500 doesn't have 60 frames per second. It does have 120 at 1080p, which I used all the time. But now that I'm like editing videos in 4K and I'm exporting in 4K, if you guys like my video, give me a thumbs up. You can check out my photos on, I'm going to be posting them on Vero. If you guys didn't know, I haven't been doing Instagram for a long time. We'll talk about that another day. And thanks for watching. Subscribe. Peace.